Hey everyone, and welcome to Minerals, Rocks, and Fossil Facts with me, Jennifer, the paleontologist. I don't know why I feel like saying that, but today I do. Anyway, today is Wordplay Wednesday, and we are going to talk a little bit about phylogeny and phylogenesis and phylogenetic trees, and how they differ from cladistics, which we talked about last week. So, without further ado, let's look at a definition. So, phylogenesis is the evolutionary development and diversification of a species or group of organisms, or of a particular feature of an organism. In simple layman's terms, it's just the study of evolutionary relationships between biological entities. So, looking at animal cousins and so on. Now, what makes phylogenesis different from cladistics? Let's take a look at that. So, phylogeny involves making groups with the help of physical characteristics. For example, when we looked at reptiles, we grouped them by physical characteristics. They all had scaly skin. We know they're all cold-blooded, or at least we did when we made the grouping. And things, basically, those are the two big things that we had for them, and that they all lay eggs. So that's our reptiles by phylogeny. Whereas with cladistics, it talks about the actual traits. So when we looked into our reptiles, we would say, well, lizards have 4 legs, snakes don't have any. Generally speaking. Yes, there are some legless lizards, but that's a whole other thing. And we use cladistics to separate those out because they do have differences in their skeletal structures and things like that, which we can get into later. But we use cladograms and phylogenetic trees to basically show these relationships. Now, how do phylogenetic trees and cladograms differ from each other? Well, let's take a look at some examples I've drawn for you. Last time I had a cladogram to show you guys, a small one like this one, and then a bigger one of Dinosauria. So here's our cladogram, and it shows the relationships we expect with these larger groups of animals. So we start with our tetrapods, which splits off between amphibians and everybody else, and then we get amniotes, who split off into synapsids and everybody else further down. And as you continue to Cerapsida, the turtles break off, diapsids, lizards, and snakes break off, and so on and so forth. And it's just showing you the relationships. Each of those shows you those characteristics, those traits that we use to determine. So our tetrapods, they all have 4 limbs. There's no fish in our tetrapods. They're in a different group entirely. Our amniotes all have young that they can have on land. They don't require water. Diapsids all have 2 extra holes in their head. So on and so forth. Now, if we were to take this same grouping and put it into a phylogenetic tree, it would look a little different. So here is our same grouping of animals in a phylogenetic tree. Notice that there are differences. So when we look at our tetrapods, our amphibians break off real soon, close to our tetrapod creation. So basically our tetrapods show up in the early middle Paleozoic-ish. Devonian, I believe, is when our amphibians show up. But it's a long time before we see any amniotes. In fact, our amniotes don't even show up until the Carboniferous. So it takes time, which means our line, if you look at it, is longer. Then we get to our Sauropsodon are synapsids. So they branch off fairly early, but it takes a long time before we see good and proper synapsids that we know them as. Whereas we see turtles a little sooner than that. Another good example is that lizards and snakes show up pretty close to each other. Crocodiles branch off early, but true crocodiles don't show up until just before our dinosaurs, or just around the same time as our dinosaurs. I'd have to really look at it. Pterosaurs and dinosaurs, I know for sure, turn up at the same time, but they branched off from each other prior to that. So you can see time being represented within this tree, which you don't get in the cladogram. And that's really the big difference between the two. Obviously, I, did this in like 10 minutes and it's not exact, but you get the idea. And that is our Wordplay Wednesday for today. So, hope you guys learned something new, and I will fossilize you later.